Hi! Welcome back to the channel. Pivot table is a great tool that can help us easily summarize and analyze our data. And it also gives us that flexibility to easily adjust the information or the data based on our needs. So for this video, I prepared a sample monthly sales report that spans over 3 years, which we will use to simulate that pivot table. So let's get on to the tutorial video. This is the table that we'll use for our pivot table exercise. And you'll notice that the period covers from 2019 to 2021. So it covers all the months of all the 3 years. And we have both volume and sales value for our measures. So the first step to create our pivot table is to select all the contents of our table. Then let's go to the insert ribbon and choose the pivot table here. So since we've selected all the content already of our table, we don't need to change this anymore. And the next options will ask us whether we want to put our pivot table in a new worksheet or in our existing worksheet, which is this one. For this exercise, let's choose the new worksheet and click OK. And you'll see that we've created our pivot table already. So in the rightmost portion of the worksheet, you'll see our pivot table fields. So in the field name, you'll see all the headers in our previous table. And underneath the field names, you'll see the filters, columns, rows, and values option. So later on, you'll see how we will use these portions once we populate the information in our pivot table. So for our first scenario, we want to know the monthly sales of our categories. So what we will do is to drag the category field name in the rows section. And you'll see now that both the beverage and the food categories are placed in our pivot table. Since we want to see the monthly sales of the categories, what we will do is to put in the value sales here. Since we haven't set the period yet to per month, the value will reflect the total sales value from 2019 to 2021. So what we will do to see the monthly sales value is to get the period here and drag it in the column section. And you will see that the period is now grouped per year. Since we want to see the monthly sales, what we will do is to right click on it and ungroup so that it will reflect the monthly sales of both categories. If you want to also look into the monthly sales of subcategory, for example, we can just drag the category back to the field name list and then choose subcategory. And you'll see that the pivot table now shows only the subcategories. We can also have multiple rows. So if we want to have both the category and the subcategory in the pivot table, you can just drag both of them in the row section. And the pivot table will show you the breakdown of all the subcategories and the categories here. In case that we want to filter the information based on a certain criteria, for example, we want to just see the sales of biscuits, what we will do is to select the subcategory row, actually any row under the subcategory, then click the drop-down button here and just select biscuits. And our pivot table will now show only the biscuit sales value. So if you also want to include other subcategories such as confectionery, noodles, and ready-to-drink juice, we can just select them here. You will see that the pivot table will populate all the information that we selected. The next thing that I'll show to you is called slicer. So the slicer is basically a method on filtering information in the pivot table. But with slicer, it gives us more flexibility in terms of choosing the information across the different field names. So let's remove first the current filter and I'll minimize first the view. And whenever I put a slicer in my pivot tables, I usually insert several columns beside the pivot table so that I can organize my slicers. So what we will do now is to click on the pivot table and then go to the pivot table analyze ribbon, choose the insert slicer, and we can select all the information or all the field names that we want to have filters with. So, for example, we want to filter product description, also have filters with the category and even the subcategory. We can have all of them selected and then click OK. And now you have your slicers for this field names. So, let's just organize this so we can easily toggle among these slicers. So the beauty of slicers is that we can easily toggle between the different field names, unlike when using the drop-down button here, where we have to move the cursor between the subcategory lines and the category here. So, for example, we want to minimize or filter our information to a certain category first. So, let's say we want to see the beverage sales. We'll just click the slicer here and it will show only the sales related to beverages. But if you want to filter our pivot table further, let's say for example, we also want to zoom in the ready-to-mix coffee subcategory. So let's click here. And now our pivot table is trimmed down further. And if we want to further filter our information down to the product level, we can do so by clicking one product here. So let's say we want to select Coffee Nest Twin Pack. And you'll notice that the numbers changed already since we filtered the information up to the product level, which is the Coffee Nest Twin Pack. So for us to see the product also in the pivot table, we can just drag the product description down to the rows portion. And now you'll see that the pivot table only shows whatever we selected using the slicers. And with the slicers, we can also select multiple items. So let's remove first all the filters in our slicers. So for example, we want to see multiple subcategories. So regardless of the category, so what we can do is to jump into the subcategory slicer here. And let's say we want to see biscuits, noodles, and ready-to-mix coffee. So what we will do is to click biscuits, and while holding the control key, we will click on the noodles, and we will also do so with the ready-to-mix coffee here. So you'll notice that the pivot table now shows only the selected information, but once we select the category, which it will alter the information based. And since we selected food here under the category, it will only show the information which falls under the food category. So biscuits and noodles will still be here. And even though if we selected the ready-to-mix coffee a while ago, it won't be seen in the pivot table since we filtered out the category portion. So what we can do is to remove the filter in the category slicer. So let's try trimming our information up to the SKU level. So since our subcategory consists of 2 SKUs or 2 products per subcategory, we can just filter the product that we want to see. So for example, we want to see Jackpot Biscuit and Lion Biscuit and Sulit Noodles. You'll notice that only the selected product description will be seen here. So we will now analyze the information in our pivot table. So for this exercise, we want to know the full year growth per year. So what we need to do is to first remove all the filters here. And then let's go to the period row or period headers rather. And then let's group them together based on years instead of months. And then click OK. So all the numbers that you see here are in value sales. So let's remove first the grand total. So we'll go to the design. So we'll choose on for columns only. And let's go back to our objective of finding the full year growth per year. So what we need to do is to bring in another value sales in the values portion. And let's just change the sequence here. We'll put the values first over the period. And you'll notice that we have similar set of columns here, but for these columns, we will use this to determine the full year growth. So let's rename this first as full year growth. So we'll just double click it and type in full year percentage growth. And in the show data as or show value as in the Windows version, we will choose percentage difference from, and the base field will be period since we're computing the difference in period, and choose previews under the base item and click OK. And since we don't have any previous year comparison for 2019, the column for 2019 will be blank. But for 2020 and 2021, you will see that the computation of growth is now visible here. So let's just change the number of decimal places. We can also use this to determine the share of business of our products, category, and subcategory. So what we will do is to drag again value sales on top. So let's just put it before the value sales. And what we will do is to double click again. And let's type percentage share of business or percentage SOB. And then go to the show data as. And what we will do is to choose percentage of column total and click OK. And you can now see that the share of business per line is now visible. Let's also change the design so that it will be more visually appealing. And since we've derived already the growth and the share of business for our analysis, we can also do conditional formatting for the full year growth. So for example, we are eyeing at least 30% year-on-year growth. So what we will do is to set conditional formatting. So for example, for all growth rates that are higher than 30%, they will be highlighted in green. And for all growth rates which fall below 30%, they will be highlighted in red. So we can just hide this column. And we'll see that in 2020, across all the SKUs and the subcategories and even the category, all of them have shown significant growth higher than 30%. However, come 2021, we can see that only select SKUs have shown growth in 2021 versus 2020. So since our pivot table here shows sales in terms of value, we can also duplicate this pivot table so that we can also measure our growth and share of business in terms of volume. So let's just copy paste our pivot table here, and in this version, let's use volumes for our measure. So we'll just return everything back to the field list, and since we want to see the volume sales here, since we want to pattern the analysis with the way we did for the sales value, what we can do is to first do the percentage share of business, right? Select show value as and choose percentage of column total. And you can see that the numbers change from numeric to percentages. Also want to do another one. So let's interchange the period and the values here. So for the next set of information, we want to see the numerical value. So let's just change this to numeric. And let's change this to total volume in cases. And let's change this one to percentage share of business. And for the last one, we want to know the growth rates in terms of volume. So we'll drag again the volume sales in cases here. And then let's right click, show value as more options. And we can put in here full year percentage growth. And show data as, again, percentage difference from. So let's choose period and choose previous year under the base item and click OK. Again, since there is no previous year to compare with 2019, the column will remain blank. But for 2020 and 2021, the growth rates will be reflected based on the comparison to the previous year. So let's remove one decimal place again. And with this, we can now have an analysis between the value sales and the volume sales. So let's hide this one. And so let's also highlight based on our volume sales target. So for example, we want to set the same parameter for the volume sales, which is to achieve at least 30% growth. And click OK. Given the figures in both pivot tables, we can say that we have exceeded more than our sales target of 30% in 2020 for both value and volume sales. However, we see that the growth has slowed down in 2021 and we weren't able to sustain the 30% year-on-year growth. We can also say that although we achieved more than the target growth in terms of value in 2020, there was still an opportunity to increase volume sales for select products such as 17 High Drink, Coffee Nest Twin Pack, Pongkan Juice, and Slay Chips to meet the expected growth target. So the year-on-year selling price increase helped us achieve the value sales number for these SKUs. For the last portion of this video, I'll be also sharing to you how you can easily visualize the growth trend or the sales trend using Sparklines. So let's first include another column here. So Sparklines basically shows a simplified way of seeing trends. So what we will do is to put a column for trends, and we want to see a line graph from 2019 to 2021 without the need of using a chart. What we will do is to go to the insert, choose Sparklines, and choose line. And since we've selected already the position where we will place our Sparklines, the next thing to do is to select the data range which the Sparkline will read. So let's choose the sales value from 2019 to 2021 and click OK. And you'll see the line graph here is now visible. We can also apply this in our volume pivot table. So let's just copy paste this and drag again. So with the Sparklines, you can automatically see that the trend for both sales value and volume sales are on an uptrend. That's it for this video. I hope that this can help you in your study or work. So feel free to put your comments and suggestions down below. And I hope that you also share this to your friends, colleagues, and family. Don't forget to like the video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe now. And click the bell button so that you'll get notified whenever I upload a new video. That's it for today. Thanks for watching again. Bye!